Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Last Edit Podcast, a podcast on film starring yours truly, Silver Hawkins, and my magnificent friend.
Citizen Slave, hello there.
As regular listeners will know, we are currently in the process of taking a deep dive into the filmography of the Coen Brothers, their entire library. We are about halfway through now, and we are now on to what a lot of people, myself included, think is their weakest film, which is The Ladykillers, a remake of the old Ealing Studios film starring Alec Guinness, Peter Sellers, and Herbert Lum, which I highly recommend people go look up. It's a very, very funny classic comedy film, British comedy film, and is basically like the Coen remake is basically set in Mississippi, in the Deep South, where it centers around an old lady, Mrs. Munson, played by Irma P. Hall, who gets a new tenant, played by Tom Hanks, who's a very, very erudite and eloquent professor emeritus, PhD. Uh, G.H. Dorr, I believe, is his name. And he brings a couple of guests with him to rehearse, ostensibly for a church orchestra. Prior making music up until the Rococo period. And really, they are a motley crew of criminals working to perform a heist on a nearby casino riverboat casino, and take a tunnel through to its vault, which is held on the mainland. And that's basically the plot of the movie. It's very different from other Coen Brother films in a lot of ways, though it does retain a musical quality to it that's very reminiscent of, say, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Also, the music is produced also by the same producer who did it on, I forget his name now,
Arthur
but
Burwell?
no, that he's the composer, the music
Oh.
producer.
Oh,
He
T-Bone Burnett?
Yeah, Burnett, yeah. Um, he's the musical producer on it as well, and you can tell that there is that same undercurrent that goes through "Oh Brother" as well, with there's a very heavy gospel feeling to the entire thing. There are a couple of scenes with actual gospel choirs, church when Mrs. Munson attends church services. I think the acting overall holds up as it does in most Coen Brother films. I don't think the film really is faulted in its acting as such. I think the performances are generally decent enough. Where the movie falters, though, is, and it's really odd to say this for a Coen Brothers film because it is, generally speaking, their greatest asset, but it is its characters. Um, there's no real likable character in the film, for one thing. Even the supposedly nice old lady, Mrs. Munson, is, to my mind, one of the nastiest characters in the film. She's thoroughly unpleasant to me. Her niceness is a veneer that she really only engages in out of vanity. Like, the only supposed kindness she shows in the film is that she donates money to a religious university, the Bob Jones University. And the only reason she does this, really, is so that she can get recognition for doing it. So that people can say, "Oh, look at Mrs. Munson. Ain't Mrs. Munson great?" So she can get her name on the newsletter, on the Bob Jones newsletter. Like, that's really the only reason why she does it. And like she Yeah, I mean, the movie, it doesn't have any likable characters. Every single character is a complete caricature and a stereotype, basically a cartoon. Some of them are like one note jokes. It it doesn't really work. Now, you had a very, very powerful sort of reaction to this film. I had a very similar reaction to it the first time I saw it. I've seen it twice since then, including this time, and my stance has sort of softened on it a bit over that time. so I am sort of less harsh on it than I was after my initial viewing. But I'm interested to hear your take on it.
Okay, so here we go. This is by far, and I mean by far, include intolerable cruelty has its issues, but it's still a good film. It's still well made. It still has its moments. It still has an interesting selection of characters, some of which you do love. This is by far the worst Coen Brothers film I have seen, by far. You're right. There isn't one single character in this entire piece that is in any way likable. They are
Or
all
relatable,
caricatures.
really, even. Yeah.
Relatable, yeah. They're all caricatures. I mean, look, I'm a horror fan, okay? I watch a lot of films with characters that are nasty and horrible, and sometimes entire films with characters that you don't connect with in that way. So I'm used to it. But this is a caper. This is a crime film about stealing from a casino, and it's got no characters that you can hook into as an audience. I don't think the cinematography was unremarkable. That's just the way I feel.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, there are some decent shots in there over the bridge, over the Mississippi.
Yeah.
I think.
But it's so overused. It drove me mad. Like I
Right.
know the Coens and good auteur directors will reuse certain shot types or certain sequences or structures, but this one was so overused by the end. I was just like, ugh. And did you hear me laugh once? Because
No,
apart
I
from
mean,
a curse,
I didn't really laugh either. Like,
it's supposed to be a
a
comedy.
giggle or two along the way. Yeah.
You
No,
know,
I mean, it like the humor doesn't really land with me. I think there are a
no.
couple of jokes that they overuse, like the irritable bowel syndrome on Garth Pancake. Not really. I don't find it particularly funny. Marlon Wayans' character, Gawain McSam, really plays a lot like the stereotypical young angry black man.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Which is not great, to be honest.
No.
It doesn't really suit the movie. And yeah, I mean, the Coens have always had extreme characters. H.I. McDonough, the dude, even Walter also.
Yeah.
Like, but they've still been believable as people. They still felt
Yeah.
like actual people. No one in this film, except possibly for Mrs. Munson, feels like an actual person. And Mrs.
No.
Munson, like I mentioned before, comes across to me as a thoroughly unpleasant person.
Yeah.
Not really a person I would want to get to know, because like her Christianity is sort of the evangelical hellfire Christianity, where if you're a sinner, you're gonna get smacked upside the head.
Yeah.
It's not about brotherly love; it's about fire and brimstone
Yeah.
and hell awaiting.
And she fits into that stereotypical box as well. Every single character in this film fits into a very neat, very unflexible, very non-complex box.
But while the characters themselves fail in terms of their writing, I do think there are some fairly strong acting performances. Like Irma Hall, I think is really really good as Mrs. Munson.
Yeah. I think J.K. Simmons as Garth while we were watching it, I said I think he's probably the strongest performance in the film, in my opinion. But the ticks of his character, the elements of his character, the IBS stuff that's just repeated so often.
Yeah, and
it
his
becomes
and his
tedious.
refrain. It's the easiest thing in the world. Yeah.
The easiest thing in the world, yeah. It just repeated so bloody often. It becomes really, really laborious because you're sat there.
It doesn't ring the way the other sort of Coen lines that we've discussed rings.
Yeah. There's no depth.
No, and you don't have the same banter that you do in Intolerable Cruelty between George Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
That's a far stronger script. I remember when you said when we get to these two films, you'd be like, these are the two you might struggle with a bit.
Yeah.
Intolerable, it's weird because I know we discussed this and we said, look, we know the script isn't as strong as prior films. We know that it's really just a straight-up romantic comedy in many respects, apart from that big twist. But it's such a stronger film than this is, in every single way. Even when we discussed the cinematography, was a touch lacking. Maybe it was a bit by the numbers. Maybe because of the genre that they were filming. But this is just feels like such a massive step down from everything else I've ever seen the Coens do, and that's a real pain for me to say. It really pains me to say that because these brothers are two of the best directors in cinematic history, and this is just like a sharp leap off a cliff in my opinion. Like I really have a strongly bad reaction to this film.
Yeah.
What is going on?
I think the most typical Coen character in the film is probably Professor Dorr, played by Cruise, and no, sorry, Hanks.
Loads of times.
But I mean, I think it's also a thankless character, a bit of a thankless role for him as well. He does deliver superbly on the dialogue that he's given, which is a lot. It's a lot, and he has to recite Edgar Allan Poe poetry. He has to
poetry and
prose. He has to do a lot, and I think he does nail it, and he does come off effectively as creepy.
I said to you within the first 10 minutes. Oh, he's a little bit skin crawly.
Much, and that's something, of course, it has in common with the professor of the original, played by Alec Guinness, who also sort of plays that sort of creepy vibe very heavily. And I think he succeeds in that, and he succeeds in a lot of like the learned monologues that the professor gives to sort of just his vernacular and his vocabulary, which is a little too flowery, a little too academic for his peers, just to sort of show off his intelligence as a way of boasting. And he's
almost a man out of time in the way he speaks to the people in the. You've got these obvious stereotypes, and then you've essentially got, I don't know, a prose-ridden Colonel Sanders as your professor, and he does look the part. He does perform well. Hanks does that role. I don't think the casting's not the problem in this. It's not the problem. It's the characters. Yeah. And that, as you mentioned, I think that's the biggest problem with this particular film.
Also, I mean, the professor also is kind of a repeat again of Ulysses McGill.
He is, absolutely is, and that's exactly what I was thinking while I was watching it. He's not as effective though, and that's the problem.
No, exactly. He's not as effective. He's not as likable. He's not as relatable as Ulysses McGill. Which is in part because of the likability that Clooney sort of just brings to that role, as opposed to sort of the creepiness that Hanks plays off. Because I mean, we know Hanks can play likable, but
hell yeah, but Oscar-winningly so.
Yeah, but it just doesn't come through here. And yeah, I mean, really, the characters are where it falters, and the pacing as well, because the initial part of the film, which is sort of the setup for the heist, which is often the most exciting part of a heist movie or a caper movie.
Go watch Ocean's 11, or the original or the more modern version. That's a masterclass in how to set that up.
It just doesn't work. You have the scene at the Waffle Hut, and it just. I know a lot of people, or some people, find that scene incredibly funny, but it just doesn't work for me.
It landed. You said prior to get into that scene, this is what is considered to be, maybe the funniest scene in the film, and for me, it landed flat, properly flat. I just sat there going, what elements of this is supposed to be funny?
I mean, the only
Mountain
part,
Girl, maybe
the only part of that scene that worked for me on a comedic level was Lump being the one who comes up with the idea of bribing them, of all people, of just bribing the boss at the casino. That was funny to me, but everything else up until that point just didn't deliver.
Well, I guess for the audience, we should just like lay out the ensemble. So there's basically 5 people who are drawn together to the heist crew. Yeah, exactly. So you've got the professor, who's Tom Hanks. You've got Marlon Wayans, who plays Gawain. You've got J.K. Simmons, who is Garth, the demolitions expert, I guess. You've got Tzi Ma,
ostensibly the demolitions expert. Yeah.
And then you've got Lump Hudson, played by Ryan Hurst, who's basically a American football player who is dumb as all hell, and it feels like they've got nothing to work with as actors, really, because once you go down the route of least depth possible, and you're only providing a stereotypical
It's just
facade
like
of a character.
one or two character traits.
Exactly, and the general is probably the funniest character in the film, but he's so one note that it's
That's why he's funny. Yeah,
well,
it's the
yeah,
straight
pretty
man. That's
much.
the straight man, basically, to all the madness going on around him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the one Coen Brothers film where I felt like, normally we talked about Coen Brothers side characters, the ancillary characters who are incredibly interesting and they have this
Yes.
immense depth. You think of like Steve Buscemi's character in Hoodsucker, just as a one thing we
The
see him
beatnik.
once, the beatnik, and you get so much from that performance in such a short space of time. In this, you have a whole film with these characters, and they offer barely anything at all. It's so one note. It was, oh, I don't know. I think I'm in shock. I think I've got some kind of PTSD from this film because I think it's really bad. Really bad. I mean, we get to a point later on where they've stolen the money from the casino, and you've got this. They're trying to work out how they can get out of the situation and keep the money, and they want to kill Mrs. Brunson, isn't it? They want to kill Mrs. Brunson.
Manson.
Munson, sorry, and they draw straws, and the short straw is Marlon, and he can't do it. Marlon Wayans' character, Garth. Not Garth, sorry.
Gawain.
Gawain. And they keep screwing up, and each of them dies, and then they get taken to a bridge and dumped off the bridge into like a landfill boat that's taking rubbish away to the landfill off in the distance. And it's repeated so many times. Like, I can understand 3 or 4 times. But by the time it's done, it must have been 7 or 8. And you're just like, oh my God, it's becoming painful. And I didn't think I'd ever say that watching a Coen Brothers film. It felt painful at times to watch. Like, I know they have a quality bar which is up here. We know that. We know that some of their films are up there amongst the greatest cinematic pieces ever devised by directors. They just are. Some of them are wonderful, utterly wonderful. But this is so low in quality compared to what they've done prior. The script, the shot selections at times, the repetition, the one note characters. The only couple of things that I can say is good about this film are the soundtrack, as you mentioned, the music selections. There are some good shots here and there, and a couple of the performances. That's it, really. There's nothing else that stands out to me. And even the editing seemed really laboured and pretty humdrum. There was nothing that stood out at all. And I just cannot believe I'm sat here after watching all of those prior films with you, eulogizing over them, and finally saying, and I know this happens with every director. Every director has made a bad film in some respect, or a film which is not quite up to the moniker that they've set. But this is really bad, man. This was really bad in my opinion. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I think it's still competently made. It's still well shot. It's still and I mean it is still only a minute and 40 minutes. It knows its screen time.
Yeah, it was short.
So I don't think I would go as far as to say that it wasn't painful for me to watch. It was, I mean, the first time there was a lot of cringing because I didn't connect with the humor. And there is still cringing, though less so as my stance has softened on it a bit over the years. But I mean, I think there are a couple of things I like about the film. I do like the professor's sort of vernacular and just his delivery of it through Hanks. I do enjoy the scene where Pancake blows his finger off. I do enjoy the scene where the general tries to kill Mrs. Manson, and through happenstance of fate, he ends up killing himself by accident. That is funny, especially because he's the most hyper competent character there, and you can't help but think as he's sneaking up on her, like how is this going to turn out? How is she not dead? Like he's literally just killed 2 other people with no effort at all in the film who were actually like resisting. So there's stuff here that I like. It's just there's also a lot of stuff in between that doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And it's not that it doesn't work because it's necessary. It's difficult to explain. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's bad because saying it's bad to me means like it's poorly made, and I don't think you can say that about it. I think there's a lot of craftsmanship still on display here in terms of the shots and in terms of like the music and the composition of it that I think still speaks to their level of craftsmanship. So I'm not quite willing to go with you to that low bar of how terrible it is. But it is by far, I think, their weakest film. And it is, for me, average at best. It maybe it's also just a result of having seen a lot of really, really worse comedies than this, frankly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say, look,
that I would rate considerably lower.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I've seen some terrible comedies, and look, this is just a difficult one to talk about. It is. Look, I've seen worse,
and you're still sort of digesting your immediate impression as well.
Yeah, I mean, we do this podcast immediately after watching the film now, so we've got a better retention of everything we need to talk about. I think, look, I'm a huge horror fan. I don't really get on with comedies that well, but I know like low quality bar in horror. So I'm not talking. This is a competently made film with a tiny smidge of a 0.1% of Coen's flair in there, here and there. It has good casting. It's got some nice moments here and there. Hanks does perform well. The cast isn't bad or anything. I think we're just spoiled by so many good prior Coen's films.
We are, and we're also spoiled by the fact that what is usually, I think, the greatest asset of their films, which is the script, is the weakest aspect of this one.
It is, yeah.
Like
the characters in the script, in particular, are really weak.
Despite sort of the love, the sort of the quality of the professor's sort of monologues, there's no really memorable line in this film. I mean, the closest you get is the it's the easiest thing in the world, and Gawain saying "damn Skippy."
Yeah,
like those are the two things that sort of stick out in my memory. And that's compared to where we've been with the Coens. That's just not good enough.
Yeah.
So
I think the high points of the Coens are, there's very few directors who have such high highs. You're talking about what? A handful. You're talking about Christopher Nolan, David Lynch.
And I mean, we are now at their eighth feature film.
Yeah.
Or so. I think we're around there. And this is when we hit sort of the low point.
Yeah. And it's a weird one because obviously we know that they go on to make more sublime films.
Yeah, I mean their next film is No Country for Old Men.
Yeah. Now normally you would have a decline with the director towards the end of their career. Yeah. So you would have like John Carpenter goes and makes Ghost of Mars. Yeah. You would have a director who kind of tails off towards the end. Romero, for instance, his last few films weren't that great. He made Land of the Dead and then kind of Diary, and it started getting worse and worse from there. It's weird to me, so weird to me, that you have 7 exceptional films, and I include Blood Simple in that, regardless of it being their first feature. It's an exceptional thriller. It's great. Then you get into Tolerable Cruelty, which is an okay, decent romantic comedy. It's perfectly good. It's got some good moments and characters, but then this kind of just sharply takes a left and goes round a roundabout for me in terms of who they are as directors. Like, I'd love to do some research into why they chose to make this, how it got made, maybe the problems during its production, or
I mean, an interesting comparison to Intolerable Cruelty is that really Intolerable Cruelty also basically didn't really have any likable characters either.
Pretty much, yeah.
And yet they still somehow managed to have more depth to them. Like both Miles Massey and Oh, I forget her name.
Oh, Marilyn.
Marilyn, yeah. Both had more depth to them, like their fear of loneliness and whatnot that was sort of underpinning their sort of desire for financial independence and
Yeah.
success and whatnot. And it's just not here.
No,
Like there is no depth
it's
here.
devoid of that. Yeah,
It's
it's completely
shell.
devoid.
Which
Yeah.
is I think we've kind of been going in circles, sadly, going over that because it is the fundamental aspect that really hurts the film, unfortunately, because there are moments like I do enjoy like the sermon that another scene I enjoyed is the sermon that the fiery preacher gives in at the church service, which is such a typical sort of evangelical American sermon full of like the fire and brimstone and smiting the sinners and whatnot.
Yeah.
That it is so kind of, it is very much it feels like the most realistic scene in the movie because it is very much like just sitting there at and attending a service like that as an onlooker or a bystander, so I do enjoy that scene as well, but it's just it's too scattered, it's too few and far between, and even though the runtime is only 1 hour and 40 minutes, it struggles with pacing, and unlike
Yeah.
the other Coen films that really flow very very well until you get to the end, there are moments where it feels like it kind of starts to overstay its welcome.
I felt the pace was a big issue. Like, obviously, we're cut in between them, kind of tunneling through, and then parts of their lives, and then Mrs. Bunsen as well, and we're cut in between these things. But the pace is so all over the place that there are moments when it just felt like it was dragging, like really dragging. And for a breezy hour and 40 minutes, you know, it it felt like it was stop-starty all the time. And
Right.
that opening, I felt like it got better as the film went on a bit, because we started to get more of a structure, and then obviously we ended up with the heisters one by one slowly dying, and then you get the structure of them getting thrown off the bridge. So it felt like it had more structure towards the end. But that opening, the setup, felt so disjointed and so all over the place and scattershot. I mean, I said to you just after that section, I'm struggling with this a bit. And I could already see the pacing issues within the first 20 minutes before we even got into the meat of the movie. And for the Coens, that seemed very odd, because these guys are masterful editors. The amount of times we've talked about a great montage or a sequence that's been edited wonderfully and then has maybe been repeated in structure later on or something. These guys are, up there with some of the greatest that they've been in terms of sequence structure and shot structure. And I just felt like this was languid at times in terms of its pace.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does drag. At times it does. I have to agree with you there.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think we talked about films before that maybe, we The Bear, for instance, which is nightmare fuel in itself, and we've talked about films that maybe one of us didn't like a little bit. But I think this is the first time I've watched a film, and I think we've spoilt ourselves. I know when you suggested the Coens, the whole filmography, it was an interesting idea because we hadn't done that before. We hadn't taken one director or directors and just kind of run with their entire filmography. But I think, you take like Martin Scorsese or something, and then you arrive at one of his bad films after watching 7, which are pretty damn awesome, and suddenly it's like a deflation. Where you're like, oh,
Right.
what the hell's happened? Like, I don't understand what's happened. And I think that's why my reaction is, like, you've seen this before and I hadn't, and I think that's why my reaction is so extreme. Like, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, I mean, as I mentioned, I had a very similar reaction to you the first time I saw it, where it just really did not connect with me on any level at all.
I think that's the problem. Like, I was sat there and I was trying to find things to connect with, and there wasn't anything.
And I think it
Like,
is.
apart from the music, maybe that was pretty much it.
I think
really.
it is because it is so different from their other films in so many ways.
Yeah.
That yeah, there is that dissonance of expectations.
Dissonance
that
is
met.
exactly the right word. Yeah, no, spot on. I mean, the next film is No Country, isn't it?
Yes.
I can't. I don't. Like I don't even have the words to understand how we've gone from Oh Brother to Intolerable to
Yeah.
this.
Oh no, it was Oh Brother to
Man Who Wasn't There. Sorry.
there, and then Intolerable. Yeah.
To this, and then to No Country.
You know, you mentioned behind the scenes stuff, and I haven't really been able to find anything at all. Like no real. I found like one interview with Joel and Ethan that's like fairly breezy on it, but like no interviews with actors or anything really about this film. But I get the sense that there is sort of an Adam Sandler quality to the behind the scenes, and what I mean by that is it's basically the crew getting together and having fun, making it. Because I have no doubt that everyone who made this had a great time making it. That is the nature of the Coen set,
Especially Marlon Wayans
and the way they work. But yeah, I mean, no, except that they I did see one interview where Irma Hall actually did slap the ever-loving life out of Marlon Wayans.
Oh, in that scene.
Yeah. For real. Multiple takes, yeah.
For real, always get a better effect.
Yeah. So I think maybe that there's a quality of that, but that's just me speculating. But I could see that as sort of just a fun way for them to get the crew get the band back together, as it were. And then
this is one I can't recommend. I've got to say. I mean, I don't know how I would recommend it. If you wanted to watch a crime thriller or a heist movie, there are hundreds out there that are better. In setup, in characterization, depth of character, pace. Most crime films will use music as a way to establish pace, especially in the setup of the different characters. I don't know. Like, I'm baffled. I'm utterly baffled by this film. I know when we watched Intolerable Cruelty, you were like, I know you haven't seen this one, and this is not quite as good as Coen's as you've seen before, and I think Ladykillers is a little bit worse. No. In my opinion, Intolerable Cruelty is a perfectly decent romantic comedy with dashes of the Coens everywhere. This almost seems like the Coens have stripped themselves out of it a bit. Because the style that I'm used to, the editing that I'm used to, the flow that I'm used to has almost been eradicated. So it's like this outlier that I didn't expect. And especially now we're going to come up to No Country. I just, like... You've damaged me with this, Silver. I think you have. I think in some way you've damaged me. But again, I think we've been so overridden with wonderful films from the Coens that you get to this one and you're just like... I feel like I've been slapped in the face, and I haven't quite recovered yet.
Right. Yeah. The Monty Python fish slap.
Yeah. I can't. In my brain, I can't quite quantify what I just watched yet. And I know you said maybe we've started doing this so we can watch the film and then do the podcast immediately. So you've got that raw kind of opinion, that raw energy about what you've just seen, and my raw energy is just it's a bad film.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely fair.
So yeah, I don't know. I can't recommend this to people. Like if you want to see the Coen Brothers' worst film, well, this is it. So watch it. I mean, is that the way I guess I could offer it to the audience? But I can't recommend this. If you want a comedy, I didn't think it was funny. If you want a crime thriller, I didn't think that part of it was particularly good either. The heist. If you want one-note characters without much depth and a weird pace and some repetition that is repeated too much, then maybe watch it. If you're into the Coens and you want to see kind of an outlier from them, something.
If you want to see Tom Hanks do something Tom Hanks has never done before,
yeah, be really fucking creepy. Like, it must be one of his oddest performances, and he fits it. If that's what they were going for, which they were, creepy, weird, kind of skin crawly character a little bit,
Yeah.
who spouts prose and poetry at you, then fine. He looks like Colonel Sanders from KFC. That's fine. That's what you're gonna get. But yeah, I can't recommend this. I can't. I can't recommend you waste 2 hours of your time on this. Now, you said you'd softened a bit over the viewings of this over the years. You've seen this, what, like 3 times now?
Yeah.
So how have you softened? Because I'm raw, as you can tell.
I mean,
I'm
softened.
angry, to be honest.
I've softened in that, as I said, like when I saw it initially, my reaction was very much akin to you, with just not connecting to it on any level. And as I've rewatched it, I have gained an appreciation for some of the performances in the film. I have gained an appreciation for some of the shots, there is the quintessential Coen moment in the film is the very end when the professor dies, when he's struck in the head by the gargoyle and goes over the railing and falls down onto one of the garbage barges. That is a quintessential Coen Brothers moment, much like the foiled murder by the general, which also gets foiled by sort of the happenstance of fate. And
we have the
chance.
cyclical structure as well that we have in most Coen. We end up back at the police station.
Yeah, and you have and also you have like the consistent shots of the gargoyles on the bridge, which then eventually culminates in one of them breaking off and killing the professor. So I have sort of gained an appreciation for those, but even as I've gained an appreciation for the film, I haven't started to find it funnier. And you're right. It's as a comedy, it isn't funny, and as a heist film, it's not exciting. So in that sense, it is difficult to recommend it. But I think it's just a fascination. Also, as someone who loves and adores literature, the professor's vernacular continues to sort of fascinate and mesmerize me in the way that he's supposed to, because he's a character who's supposed to sort of mesmerize you with language. And I think Hank just pulls that off really, really well. And so
that's the best thing about this movie, the performances. Well, let's take nothing away from the actors in this.
I think I think it's still the music, like the gospel music
the soundtrack
is still I think the greatest asset, and is still one of the reasons I would potentially sit down and watch it in the future, is that flow of gospel music through it that really, really helps. I mean, if that wasn't in the film, the pacing would be insufferable.
Yeah, it would. It really would.
But it is greatly helped by this underlying tissue, or what you want to call it, or web of music that really, really carries through the film, and this evangelical undertone that is played on by Irma P and Mrs. Munson.
Yeah, so drawing to a conclusion, I guess. It doesn't work as a comedy. It doesn't work as a heist movie. It's got a great soundtrack. It's got some good performances. The characters are very 2D. They lack depth.
I mean, they're not even 2D. They're 1D.
Well, 1D,
they're one-dimensional. Yeah. Even two-dimensional is being generous. Yeah.
That's a stretch. Yeah, that's a stretch. The editing pace is all over the bloody place. There are a couple of moments here and there that I enjoyed, but honestly, I cannot recommend this. If you are a diehard Coen fan and you want to just watch the catalogue, by all means, maybe watch this once as kind of outlier. But for me, I really struggled with this one.
I think it's really telling that the only moment of characterization that I remember from the film is when Garth Pancake confesses or tells Gawain about how he met Mountain Girl at an IBS, an irritable bowel syndrome conference. And you get the background for how they met each other. That's the only point, really, at which you get offered like some kind of character background or motivation or really anything. And
the thing is, though, you telling me about him meeting Mountain Girl at an IBS event or whatever, I just laughed because it was funnier than when it happened in the film. That's like, I don't even know, man. Like, remember when we watched The Bear and you broke my brain for a bit? I think this has broken. I think this has broken my brain for a bit. Seriously, I had no expectations going in. I've seen the original, but as I said to you, I barely remember it. It's a very, very long time ago. I know it's a good film, so I just knew it was a heist movie. That's it. That's all I could remember. But you've broken me again. You have. This is the second time. Yeah, maybe you've broken me a little bit more, but this is the definite second time you've legitimately broken my film brain. Because I don't know what to make of this. I definitely didn't like it, and I'm just trying to extrapolate stuff that I did.
Yeah.
And there's so little of it.
Right.
That it's just really difficult.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. I do, because I had a very similar experience the first time. And maybe it's just that I grow numb to it as I as I watch it again. Maybe that's what softens me. But I just, when I watch it, I just do find stuff that I appreciate, that's able to sort of keep me from the stuff that doesn't work in the film, which is a lot.
I feel like it's one I'm going to have to give a couple of years before I go back to.
Yeah, I mean that's what I did. To be fair, like I said, this is only the third time I've seen it. I watched it once after the first time, which was years after, maybe 10 years. So definitely, I can recommend giving it a couple of years.
Well, I mean, I get it. I mean, there are certain directors' films that, like David Lynch's Eraserhead. Okay, I know how difficult that film is to watch for certain people. It's got a very industrial soundtrack. It's disjointed. It's
Right.
non-linear at times. It's involved with the mind and how the mind works, and it's got allegories and oblique reference bloody everywhere. And I can see why someone might find that uncomfortable. Even The Lighthouse, which I saw with it in the last year, has got some of that, and I can see why someone will struggle to watch it. But those films just offer so much more depth than this, that you keep scratching the surface and pulling back the facade and finding more, in meaning terms or whatever. Whereas
Right.
this, there wasn't anything, and that's,
No, it is shallow.
Incredibly shallow, and it's just something I don't expect from the Coens, because every one of their films that I have seen has an inordinate amount of depth,
Except,
in character and narrative.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the closest one that doesn't have all that much is Intolerable Cruelty, which we talked about, which is just made to sort of be a breezy romantic comedy.
Yeah. But as you said, those characters,
they still have depth to them. Yeah.
Yeah, interwoven are the themes of loneliness and isolation, and what you to do with your life, and the vacuous nature of owning lots of money and things and materialism. That's there.
Yeah.
This has none of that, and I think if at least a couple of the main characters had just a bit more depth, a bit more to them, the reasons why they're stealing the money, anything at all, just a piece of string that I could grab and extrapolate more from, then I wouldn't. I feel mildly angry, quite frankly. I didn't expect to. I don't know what I expected, but I just wanted more. I just wanted more depth of any kind at all.
Pretty much everything you're feeling is what I felt after watching Prometheus.
Oh, don't get me. That's a whole other podcast. That's a whole. If you want to talk about Prometheus, we can talk about Prometheus. My God.
Man. Oh man, don't even get me started. Like, I remember back in the day, I started like a thread on the IMDb message boards that was like 20 things I hated about this movie, and it ballooned to like, I don't know, 80 or 100 pages on the message board. Like,
oh wow, that's impressive for a forum thread. That's impressive, man. Yeah. That's going above and beyond. Oh, so okay, I guess we should wrap this up, because we're kind of starting to repeat ourselves now. I can't recommend this. So if you're wanting to watch a heist movie, go and watch something better. If you want to watch a comedy, go and watch something that's funny. I can understand what you say about it's competently made. It's not the worst film in the world, but I took nothing from this. And when I take nothing from a film, that's me really done. I can't. Which
is fair.
There's not much more I think I can say about it. I just can't recommend it. I just cannot recommend it. And for a Coen Brothers film, that's really difficult for me to say. Because even Intolerable Cruelty, I can say, if you want a romantic comedy, it's a good romantic comedy. Go and watch it. Might
If
not
you
be
want to
the
see
most...
Catherine Zeta-Jones be sexy, go watch it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's stuff in it which is good. Whereas with this, oh man, and honestly, if you want to hear the soundtrack, just put it on YouTube. Just listen to the soundtrack on YouTube and listen to the gospel songs if that's what you like. I cannot recommend this film. Cannot. Sorry.
No, I mean,
Wow.
like I say, I think it's fair. Like I would, if I had to recommend it, it would be with reservations. Yeah. So, it is by far the weakest film in the
Yeah.
in the
And we're about to get to No Country, which is, again, just baffles me, blows my mind because I
yeah,
love
and
No
and
Country
after
for Old Men.
and after No Country, I think it's True Grit.
Yeah.
And
Which I love, which I also
then
love.
I think it's Burn After Reading. Either that or Burn After Reading is in between No Country and True Grit. I don't remember, but
Okay.
but we'll find out.
Again, three films I love. Burn After, maybe not quite so much, but I've only seen it once, and that was a long time ago. But all three films I love. So it baffles me. This has been a baffling podcast. It's been a baffling day. That was a baffling film. I'm utterly baffled. That's where we should leave it. I'm baffled.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching or listening to us talk in circles while we try to sort of digest our impressions of this unique entry into the Coen Pantheon or Coen
I like
Library.
that. Unique. Good.
And I hope you will join us for the next episode where we take on No Country for Old Men, which we are looking forward to.
We are indeed. Take it easy, guys.
Take care.